Hi, and I am Mordechai Becher. Welcome to Jewish Broadcasting Services, Dimensions of the Daf, in which we deal with a different issue in the Talmudic law, Jewish law, every episode. No continuity is required to understand it, and each episode is like a quantum unit of Talmud and of Jewish ideas. So welcome, and let's start with marijuana. The cannabis conundrum. So as you're probably all aware, cannabis or marijuana is a controlled substance in the United States, in many countries in the world. It's illegal to possess, to sell, etc. by federal law. However, in approximately, I think it's 22 states now in the United States, marijuana is allowed to be used for medical purposes, medical marijuana, and there are a few states, like Colorado, where recreational use is also permitted. It's interesting to note that even though in these states marijuana is permitted for medical purposes and even for recreational in some cases, it's still considered to be a criminal offence under federal law. It's just the federal government does not do anything about it. So there are three basic uses for marijuana: therapeutic, palliative, and recreational. Therapeutic means to heal things, to heal a sickness. Now, how does marijuana work there? Well, first of all, sometimes people with certain medical conditions and certainly people undergoing certain treatments lose their appetite. Marijuana can restore their appetite. So it's therapeutic in that sense. It is also being used effectively, and extracts from it have been used effectively in controlling seizures. Children who have seizures, who have had also neurosurgery. This is actually an effective drug to control those seizures, which are, even though not always life-threatening, sometimes life-threatening, but certainly painful and problematic. So it is therapeutically used in those areas. Palliative, meaning to alleviate pain. So obviously people with back pain, people with various other types of pains, maybe anxiety, etc. So marijuana and other drugs have been used as palliative. Palliative meaning not curing anything, but actually taking care of the pain. And finally, there is recreational use of marijuana, which is in order to experience high and euphoria and so on and so forth, which is probably the most problematic, as we will see. So let's begin, first of all, with some sources in Jewish law regarding therapy or healing in the first place. As you probably know, there are some religions where they look down upon the medical profession. They look at it as interfering in God's conduct of the world. God has struck this man, how dare you to intervene and heal? So we, in Jewish tradition, obviously have a strong opinion that that is not correct. God wants us to intervene. He wants us to heal. He wants us to alleviate people of pain, as we shall see. Exodus 21, which talks about two men quarreling, they're having a fight. One of them strikes the other with a stone or his fist, and he doesn't die. But he has to lie down. He has to be, he has to recuperate. He has to lie down in bed, etc. So we are told that the Torah says, "You shall cause him to be thoroughly healed." V'rapo yarapeh, you shall heal him. Literally, you shall heal him. You shall heal him. And we have discussed this before. But what it basically means is that of the things that you have to pay someone to whom you cause injury, there are 5 damages you have to pay. One of them is medical expenses. Obviously, if the Torah, the Bible, is obligating you to pay medical expenses for someone who you hurt, then obviously it is permitting the use of medicines, permitting the intervention of a doctor. Otherwise, what are you doing paying medical expenses? So that's a very simple deduction. As the Talmud says, you'll see in the Talmud in Bava Kama, the school of Rabbi Ishmael said, quoting the verse, "You shall heal him, you shall heal him." From here we derive the doctor has been given permission to heal. Discussion exists amongst the Jewish commentaries as to why do you need permission to heal, and some say it's because there are religious religions that feel that it's wrong to intervene. And so the Torah gives us explicit permission to intervene because it wants us to use our minds, to use our intelligence in order to heal people and to alleviate them of pain. Maimonides, who himself was a physician, many of our great scholars were physicians. Maimonides says permission is granted. The reason permission is needed is not because we need permission to intervene. He says that is obvious, that we can figure out from logic. He says in the same way as someone who's hungry will eat and would not say, well, if God wants me to die of hunger, it won't help me to eat. And if God doesn't want me to die of hunger, I don't need to eat. Maimonides says that's stupidity. Maybe God's decree is conditional upon your activities and your actions and your free will. And he says, therefore, I don't need permission to heal from that perspective. Where do we need permission to heal? Because often therapy has negative side effects. Interventional medicine, as opposed to prophylactic medicine, i.e. prevention of disease through diet, exercise, and environment, he says that is always the better type of medicine. But he says once you have to intervene with drugs or an operation, there's always a negative side effect. You're hurting someone, causing them pain, causing some type of possibly even permanent damage, but in order to alleviate a more serious condition, he says you need permission to do that. And the Torah is giving permission to the doctor, even if there might be negative side effects, even if you are inflicting pain upon your patient, but if you are doing it in order to heal them, and it is therapeutic in the sense that it heals them from a more serious ailment or pain, then it is permitted. And therefore the Torah gives permission for the physician to heal, and of course, some say this permission also, and this is pretty fairly well accepted, this permission is also a mitzvah, it's an obligation, and we derive this also if you have a look on the, I keep pointing here, you're of course looking at it on the screen, which is here. So in Leviticus where it says, these are the commandments and the laws that a man shall do, person shall do, and live by them, v'chai b'hem. So v'chai b'hem, you shall live by them, is not just a statement of fact, it's actually an imperative, meaning the obligation is to live by them, and from here we actually derive that life takes precedence over many of the commandments, even if it involves transgressing, I put that in quotation marks, transgressing Shabbat or the Day of Atonement. Life and the obligation to live overrides most of the commandments, most of Jewish law, with the exception of a few very serious crimes like murder, idolatry, adultery, etc. But in general, most of Jewish law is put aside in order to save a life. And so the living or saving a life or giving someone life is certainly an imperative of Jewish law. And I just pointed out here that the Mishnah actually derives from that verse that we discussed in Exodus 21, which is that if you injure someone, you've got to pay for 5 things: depreciation of their total value, their pain, healing, therapy, loss of time, meaning their unemployment, and also for any degradation, humiliation you may have caused them. And we know that a person is obligated to seek out medical attention and to take care of themselves. From the Talmud states in Shabbat 32a, Rav Yanai said a person should never stand in a place of danger and say that a miracle will be performed, lest a miracle not take place. Even if a miracle takes place, his merits are depleted. In other words, Jewish law says you can't rely on miracles. Miracles don't always happen. In fact, usually they don't happen. Miracles are infrequent occurrences, even though God is capable of doing miracles, but he wants the world and our lives to be run according to natural law and based on the laws of nature that he planted in the world from the very beginning, or however long ago that was, 14.2 billion or so years. So he planted certain laws in the world, and he wants us to act according to those laws, and the Torah is predicated on the assumption that we are not living in a miraculous type of existence, we're living in a naturalistic existence, and hence I cannot rely on miracles. And the Talmud goes on further to say that even if a miracle does happen, you've pretty much depleted your merits, because it's a lot of merits are required. Your spiritual bank account requires that you be quite a righteous person in order to deserve a miracle. And if you did have a miracle, then that is, so to speak, a huge withdrawal, so to speak, of the spiritual bank account. And so hence you cannot just close your eyes and cross the road and say, oh, God will protect me. That is wrong. That's against Jewish law, as we see. So what I'm pointing out from all of the above is that there is a basic obligation of therapeutic care, of healing people, It is an obligation for someone who is able to do it to heal someone, and it's an obligation for the patient to seek help. So use of marijuana or whatever type of therapy or drug would be permitted, clearly, because it is a mitzvah, it's an obligation, and there doesn't seem to be any prohibited, and even if there would be some prohibited substance, but it's not, that would be okay. And of course, we have considerations of mental health. If you look at the next screen, we have the body being healthy and complete, Maimonides says, is of the way of God. It's impossible to understand, perceive the knowledge of the Creator when one is sick. So a person must distance themselves from things destructive to the body and to conduct themselves in those things that are strengthening and therapeutic. So certainly seeking therapy, if marijuana is going to restore one's appetite, ability to sleep, ability to function, these would seem to be considerations that Jewish law would certainly take into account. In the laws of homicide, Maimonides tells us that there are actually many legislations, much legislation which was enacted by the sages of the Talmud of things which a person should not do because they're dangerous to life. And he says, no one is allowed to say, what do they care? It is actually a public interest, and it is of interest of Judaism to preserve people's health and to preserve the life and the health and the goodwill of the public. So again, I'm pointing out here that this is also on the other hand. On the one hand, there is an obligation to seek therapy to cure, etc., and hence use of marijuana for that would certainly be okay. On the other hand, there is also an interest in general public health. So one has to be concerned with if there are negative side effects of marijuana, which there are. First of all, it's very often a gateway drug to other type of more serious drug abuse, which have got very serious issues. It is, although not necessarily chemically addictive, but it certainly creates a great desire for further marijuana, certainly a tax on one's financial resources, and certainly a lowering of one's, I guess, efficient living, thought, etc. We'll discuss that later. So certainly there would be interest, public interest in controlling a substance which may have negative impact. We also find source number 8, Bava Kama. It says that Rabbi Elazar HaKapar said that you are not allowed to hurt yourself, right? The Nazarite who denies himself wine and grooming and socialization for a month is considered to be a sinner. He sinned against his own soul. So we see here that you're not allowed to cause pain to yourself. I'm pointing that out because when we talk about palliative care, Judaism considers the alleviation of pain to also be a mitzvah, an obligation. And sometimes the boundary between therapeutic and palliative is not so clear. In other words, administering something which improves someone's mood or reduces their pain may also help them to be cured or be healed from whatever ailment, disease they have. So it's not always clear that you to distinguish between palliative, which is just pain control, versus therapy, because sometimes part of therapeutic care is pain control, and the less pain and maybe also the better the mood of the person will be psychosomatically, and there's psycho and soma is the body and psycho is the mind, but the mind affecting the body is certainly something well established. Maimonides was a major believer in that. So obviously, for palliative care of a patient who has got problems, this may also help for their therapy. And we see from Rabbi Elazar HaKapar that the alleviation of pain is also a concern in Jewish law and is considered to be, I think, no less a mitzvah, an obligation for a physician to alleviate pain than to also heal someone. And just one final source as a general intro is Maimonides in the Laws of Sanhedrin. We know from Maimonides, he says that it says the Sanhedrin neither executes nor inflicts punishment on someone based on the accused's own admission, since the accused may be mentally deranged regarding this matter. Perhaps he is severely depressed and he wants to die. He's like one of these people who stab themselves or throw themselves off roofs. Perhaps he admits to a crime that he admitted that he didn't do in order to be killed. In other words, why don't we accept the confession of someone in a Jewish court? A guy confesses to a capital crime. So some commentaries say it's in order to prevent torture and abuse suspects, because if we don't accept a confession, then obviously torture is going to be useless. But Maimonides gives a different reason. Maimonides says you can't accept a confession for a crime that requires a punishment, because that person who's confessing, who knows, maybe he is depressed, maybe he wants to die, maybe this is his way of committing suicide or causing himself suffering. And one of the great commentaries, the Radvaz, he explains it in the following way. He says, look, you want to confess to that you owe money, you can do that, because the money is yours to give away. He says, but you want to confess to give up your life or your limb, he says that you cannot do, because you don't have complete ownership of that. You are a steward, a watchman, so to speak, for what God has given to you. In other words, the life, the soul belongs to God, and you've been given use of it. So he says you can't confess. You cannot give up something which is not yours to give up. And so from a Jewish perspective, Jewish law looks at our health and our body and our soul as not totally belonging to us. We are supposed to take care of it, but it's not really ours. That's why suicide is a prohibition and a sin in Jewish law, and self-mutilation, etc., are prohibited, and that's why we don't accept this confession. Again, what we've established here is that therapy, healing, palliative care are both mitzvot, obligations. A person is obligated to take care of themselves. They're not allowed to commit suicide or damage themselves, and we have to A, act in ways which are healthful to the body, and B, seek to cure illnesses and also to alleviate pain from a patient or a victim. Now, but there's a big caveat here. The caveat here, if you have a look at the next screen, is Maimonides in his Regimen of Health. Maimonides, although he was a great Torah, he was, in addition to being a great scholar of Torah, one of the greatest codifiers of Jewish law, and also a brilliant philosopher, he was also a physician, and quite a well-known physician in his time. Although he was a physician, he did not feel that medicine, which was interventional and drugs, he says he felt that you should try to avoid them if possible. As you can see, the Torah is deeply concerned with the mental welfare of the Israelites, whether they be sinful or righteous. The importance of mental health, the improvement of behavior, which is the cure of the mind and its faculties, are stressed by the Torah. And also, and I guess as a correlation or a result of these things, he says it's very dangerous to indulge in medicine, tranquilizers, sedatives, or stimulants, and to become habituated to them. Maimonides was writing in the 13th century. And he was saying, don't indulge in medicine. He didn't say don't, because sometimes you need medicine, but he says it's dangerous to indulge in medicine, tranquilizers, sedatives, or stimulants, and to become habituated to them. Opiate addiction is not a rare thing today. I mean, a lot of people who have, for very good reasons, were prescribed opiates have unfortunately, tragically become addicted to them. And certainly marijuana might come under the category of things which are dangerous, because you become habituated to it. Once you need it, once you cannot function in your normal life without it, then whether it's chemical or not, you are addicted. And Maimonides felt that it was dangerous because of that. And if you skip just to number 12, there's actually a Talmud says in Psachim that the Rav Chia said to his son, don't take medication. And one of the great commentaries, the Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, says, don't drink medication because it establishes a habit and your heart would desire them. And in addition, you'll waste your money on them, and even for therapeutic reasons, not consume drugs if there is an alternative treatment available. So granted, if there's an alternative treatment available, you should have it. And if there is no alternative, you can take the drugs that the doctor prescribes. But here again, we are being warned by another 13th century rabbi, this one in France. Maimonides was in Cairo, telling us, don't take this medication, try to avoid it because it could be addictive. Nachmanides tells us in his commentary on the Torah, there's a commandment that says, you shall be holy unto the Lord your God, Kedoshim Tihyu. And Nachmanides says, because the Torah forbade incest, it forbade adultery, non-kosher foods, etc., but it permitted marriage and the consumption of bread and wine. He says, so he points out that it would be possible you could be a hedonist, lustful, addict, vulgar and corrupt without transgressing anything, without doing anything illegal, what he calls naval birshut HaTorah. So the Torah gives a general command called, you shall be holy. In other words, what Nachmanides is saying is the following, and he says this more or less explicitly, which is before you do something, you have to ask yourself, first question you have to ask, is it permitted, is it not? Once you know it's permitted, you have to ask a second question. You have to put another dialogue box in the flow chart. What's the next question you have to ask yourself? Is this holy? Is it permitted? Yes, doesn't automatically mean I can do it. I have to ask myself a second question, is it holy? So, can I define what's holy? How much food to eat? Smoking, it's hard, how much alcohol to drink, etc. I can't define that. It's a type of thing which each person has to know in and of themselves. Is it permitted? Yes. But now that's not enough to tell me to do it. I have to ask myself, is it holy? And so that, Nachmanides says, is a catch-all commandment to try to regulate the human being, for a person to self-regulate. It's not legislated. There's no laws about how much to eat and how much alcohol to drink and so on and so forth. This is the type of thing which a person has to really regulate themselves in, because it's impossible to establish amounts and frequency of these things. A person has to know in themselves. And I think the same would apply to the use of recreational drugs, that certainly, even if something is permitted, legal, that's not sufficient to tell me that I should do it, I'm allowed to do it. I have to ask myself the next question, is it holy? And of course, as the Rashbam and Maimonides both said, there's also the issue of addiction. And by addiction, they don't necessarily mean chemically addicted to something. It means habituated to something that I need it now. I can't get by without it. As the Talmud says in Yoma, Rav Huna said, if you do something often enough, like if you do a sin and repeats it, it becomes permitted. And the Talmud goes on to say, it doesn't not really mean permitted, but in your eyes it becomes permitted. You now rationalize something. You now see it not only as permitted, and the Kotzker Rebbe famously said, if you do it already 4 times, then it becomes a mitzvah. You feel it's obligatory. Why isn't anyone else doing it? And Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, very great sage from last century, beginning of the 20th century, he writes regarding smoking tobacco. He says the following: a number of doctors have stated that a weak person should not accustom himself to cigarette smoking, as it weakens him and can sometimes even endanger his life. I've spoken to a number of people who are smokers. They've told me they're aware of the dangers, but they are so accustomed to smoking, it's difficult for them to stop. I replied to them, who permitted you to accustom yourself to it in the first place? So we see Rabbi Kagan, the Chafetz Chaim, one of the greatest of Torah sages of that century, he actually feels that even smoking tobacco people habituated themselves to it and became addictive, and he says consequently prohibited by Jewish law. I would like to conclude with a very interesting statement by take on the issue of recreational marijuana by Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein was a brilliant scholar, had questions addressed to him literally from all over the world, from all types of people, and just thousands of responses. So one of the questions he was asked was, is it prohibited to use marijuana for recreational purposes? He was not asked, this was his question, this was asked I think in the 1972, so it was not yet used for medicinal purposes then. It was asked, and this question was asked by some teenagers, if they could use it. So he gives a number of reasons against it. One, he says, well, your parents will certainly not be happy, and so you have a biblical obligation to honor your parents, number one. Number two, he says the law of the land prohibits it, and Jewish law says you must observe the law of the land. So you cannot have it for that reason. And he says, third, he says, it obscures the clarity of mind that you need, because we believe you should be in a state of clarity of mind always, because you have to either study Torah, do mitzvot, make free will decisions. These require a clarity of mind. They require not being drunk or high, and consequently he says that will be problematic because you put yourself in a situation where you are not capable of fulfilling your job as a human being, exercising your free will, making decisions, fulfilling the Torah, the commandments, etc. And his final argument, which is very, very, he also points out that there's possible danger to health, which we know. You don't have to be Bob Marley smoking 20 pounds of marijuana a day or Peter Tosh, etc. The Rastafarians legalize it, don't criticize it, right? But you don't even have to have that amount to know that if you do smoke marijuana, there are certainly health issues involved. And certainly health risks involved. But he says that would be another consideration, which according to the sources we mentioned above is a very serious consideration. But his most interesting prohibition, he says, is based on a very strange and shocking law. Deuteronomy 21, the wayward and rebellious son, ben sorer umoreh. The Torah tells us that this wayward and rebellious son is brought by his parents to the Sanhedrin, and they say he doesn't listen to us, he is zolel v'sover, he is wayward and rebellious, he is a glutton and a drunkard. So in the Bible, it says this kid is killed by the court, which is shocking. Now, before you turn the set off, the Talmud says that this never happened and never will happen. At least one view in the Talmud, which seems to be accepted, is that never happened, never will happen. It's a theoretical law. But what is the meat of this law, excuse the pun, of this gluttony and this glutton? What is this gluttony? So if you look in the Talmudic source I bring here from Sanhedrin 70a, 71b, 72a, it says that this kid is around 13, has become a glutton. He's become addicted to meat and wine. So both a food addiction and also an alcohol addiction. And the Talmud goes on to say that he started stealing from his parents in order to feed his alcoholism and to his eating disorder. Eventually, it's not going to be enough money just to steal from his parents. He's going to have to steal from other people. And eventually, people generally don't give up their money without a struggle. Eventually, he's going to end up in violence. And who knows if eventually he's going to end up in killing someone. In other words, we're describing a chain of events of addictive behavior that goes down the slippery slope from addiction to theft to violence to murder. So while it's true that this didn't actually happen, and we never executed someone for doing this, why is it, if it is theoretical, why is it in the Torah? So Moshe Feinstein points out the following. He says this: furthermore, he creates within himself, meaning the person who's smoking marijuana regularly, an intense desire greater than the desire for food and other physical needs. There are those who are not able to control or eliminate this desire, and they transgress this serious prohibition of the wayward and rebellious son. How much more so is it forbidden to bring oneself to an even greater desire, especially one where there's no physical necessity? So basically, what Moshe Feinstein is saying is there is a biblical prohibition against creating an intense desire, an addiction in yourself. Now, you could ask, how does this differ from alcohol? And you are right, it probably doesn't. You're not allowed to drink alcohol to the extent that it becomes you become an alcoholic and create an uncontrollable desire and get drunk. But certainly regarding recreational marijuana, it appears, at least from Maimonides, the Rashbam, the Chafetz Chaim, and the various other sources I mentioned, that it is prohibited by Jewish law. Regarding therapeutic and palliative, it's certainly okay according to Jewish law. One has to check with your local authorities as to whether it's okay if you're in one of those 22 states or not. But certainly it would be permitted just not only to cure a disease, but also just purely for palliative to prevent pain. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. This is Mordechai Becher, Jewish Broadcasting Service, Dimensions of the Daf.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.